Hi and welcome to my channel. My name is Sarah and I love to talk about books, and today I'm talking about my favourite bookish acquiring topic: secondhand, pre-loved, thrifted books with the second tome around tag. This tag was created by Julie over at the Hungry Bookworm. I don't think anyone's ever tagged me in it, but I've got a little list of tags that I've come across that sound interesting and that I want to do one day. And so this one is the one that I've plucked out of the hat. I haven't really looked at the questions and I haven't really done any prep. So fingers crossed we can have just like a nice wee chat about why I love buying my books secondhand. Before I start, just quickly, my neighbours are getting some work done, and just as I was setting up, their builders arrived and they are quite noisy, so I'm hoping I can get this done before they start. So I better crack on. So I've got the questions here. So number one is, do you buy secondhand books? And absolutely. I think probably most of my books are secondhand. Occasionally I will buy a new book, but usually even then it has to be in some sort of deal, like the Waterstones 3 for 2, because fundamentally I want the most book for my moolah. But I'm just looking at these bookcases here, and yeah, pretty much way more than half were secondhand, and that goes for all the books on all my bookshelves around the house. I think the only period in my life where secondhand hasn't been my first port of call when buying books is when I actually worked at Waterstones. I used to get a 33% staff discount, so a lot of my wages went back into the company with that. But yeah, unless someone's bought me a book token or I'm feeling especially flush, I will usually buy my books secondhand. And yeah, like I said, most of that has always stemmed from just wanting to have the most books for the least amount of money, because I've never really been like having a lot of disposable income. But you know, as time's gone on, I've come to understand the value of buying secondhand for other reasons. So giving money to good causes who are selling the books, or being more aware of the environmental impact of always buying new, and also just not, it's a strange thing to say because obviously I am purchasing things, but I'm really conscious these days of not wanting to feed into that consumerism and capitalism, and try and find ways to support like my interests or whatever without feeding into these big businesses. I know there's a flip side to that, and that if I'm not buying new, I'm not supporting the author, and that is something that I do struggle with. So I guess kind of booktube is a way of giving back to that, because I'm highlighting authors that I do like and that people might then go and buy new. I also use NetGalley, so when I receive a book from NetGalley, I'm giving it a bit of promotion, putting some reviews on like Goodreads on here and things like that. So that's a way of giving back. And I know in the grand scheme of things, particularly because I've got such a tiny channel, that probably makes very little difference, but for now that's what I do. And if there is an author that I really love and they come out with a new book and I have the money, I will buy it new. Because one of the other things that I really love about buying secondhand is that you never really know what you're going to get. You can't just go into like a charity shop or whatever and be like, oh, I want this book, this book, this book, because you can only choose from what is there at the time. And that kind of lucky dip part of it is is really fun as well, and it just adds to the experience where you really are delving into these bookshelves and having a root around, and it's like a little treasure hunt. Question number 2 was, what was your last purchase? And I think it's probably the books that were in my most recent book haul, which I'll put a little thing up in the corner. So there there was a lot there. I'm just looking around at the piles around me, and I think there's like Pull of the Stars by Emma Donoghue, Dutch House by Anne Patchett, this really lovely hardback edition of Black Swan Green by David Mitchell. I think there's, I don't know if you can see them if they're in shot, yeah, there's a few on that pile as well. I went to a local book sale and spent, I think in the video I said it only cost me £13 for all those books, but actually it was only £10 for all those books. They were £1 each. I did spend £13, but 3 books were for my kids. So yeah, I got 10 books for £10, which is always an amazing shopping experience. Question number 3 is, what condition do you find acceptable? And yeah, obviously when you're buying secondhand books, some of them have never been read and they're pristine. Other ones have maybe sat on a shelf or in a box for a long time and they're scuffed and they have been read and the spine's cracked and things. And for me, I think it does depend on certain things, like how much do I really want that book? How much is the book? And yeah, and how bad is the condition? So I'm just looking through my piles here. So yeah, I think this one's probably a good example. Like, this isn't in immaculate condition, but it's a beautiful edition. With, yeah, you can tell it's been read because obviously the pages are a bit splayed, but like with the sprayed edges and things. And so that was only £1. It's not amazing condition. It's not a book that I'm desperate to read. So if that had been, say, like Oxfam, their books are normally like £2.53. I wouldn't have bought it in Oxfam for that. I don't know if you can see that. Like the spine's obviously quite, it's not cracked, but you can tell it's been read. But for £1, that's fine. I think probably the worst condition book that I've bought in a long time, it's down here, was this copy of The Bear and the Nightingale. Yeah, it kind of looks like someone's maybe dropped it in the bath or left it out in the rain. It's not, yeah, I think that's probably the worst condition book that I have bought secondhand for a long time. But again, it was only £1. I'd heard about this book quite a lot and wanted to try it, but I wasn't sure if I would really like it. So, you know, I thought I would just give it a punt on that. And I think it actually looked worse when I bought it because this has been sitting in a pile with other books stacked on top of it. So I think it's flattened out a little bit. But yeah, so that's probably the worst condition one that I've bought in a while. But then, yeah, the ones that I held up earlier, I'm just trying to look. Oh no, I think they both, I was going to say these are in really like unread condition, but actually a little bit of stuff going on the spine, so they maybe have been read, but definitely only once. I think I'm far more picky about the condition if I'm paying full price for a book. Question number 4 is, after you have read said book, do you keep it for a reread or redonate it? And it really does depend. I mean, let's just say across the board, I'm not very good at unhauling, so I think my default is I will keep it. Whether I'm keeping it for a reread or not is debatable because I don't do a lot of rereading either, but I like having books around my house. I love the aesthetic of it, but also just to be able to see them and remember that I read them, and have that possibility of rereading them, or, you know, lending them to someone. That never happens. Yeah, so I grew up in a house with books everywhere. I want to have a house with books everywhere, so I don't place a lot of emphasis on unhauling. But when I do unhaul, absolutely, I take them to somewhere I can donate them. I would never just like chuck books in the bin unless they're like, there's a couple of books in my entire life that I have thrown in the bin because I found them just so heinous and horrible. One was Chris Lynch's Inexcusable, which is basically a rapist sympathy story. And I think similarly, Roald Dahl's My Uncle Oswald, or whatever it was called, which is also about rape and making light of it. So I think I probably threw both of those in the bin, but pretty much I would always donate a book. Question number 5 is, do you have a favourite place to go when looking for a secondhand book? Favourite would suggest one. I have many. I don't have footage of a lot of them though, so it's probably not going to mean very much. My local community book sale, which has always been one of my absolute favorite places to go. It's just the quality of books that you get in there is amazing, and they're £1. You cannot beat that, and it's obviously going to back to the community as well, which is also a great kind of halo point when you're buying secondhand books. I also, and I haven't been since, you know, before COVID. I tried to go and it was still shut and I haven't gone back, but there is this amazing, and I always say I'm going to take you guys along with me, and I still haven't gone, but there is like this cavern of secondhand books called Voltaire et Rousseau, in the West End of Glasgow, and it's basically just haphazard piles of secondhand books. And when I was at university, that's where the majority of my secondhand books would come from, because there's also like this little hippie tea shop down the same lane as this bookshop. So I would kind of, if my lecture's finished and I still had a chunk of the day, I would hop on the subway and go for some tea and hummus or something, and then I would spend like an hour or so rummaging around in Voltaire Rousseau, because you need to invest that time in there. There is no real system. You have to, it's a bit like shopping in TK Maxx. You have to be prepared to go deep to find the stuff that you want. But also like just general, if it's a charity shop, sometimes I'll look at the clothes. But if I go into a charity shop, I go straight to the books. It's the first place that I go. In my town, we have a lot of charity shops. The best one is the British Heart Foundation, I think, because Oxfam has good books, but they're quite pricey. And some of the other charity shops, their book sections are not very good. The British Heart Foundation is kind of in the middle, and it also has like the biggest book selection as well. But then my local co-op has like just this random table of books that people have donated, and they're raising money for, I actually don't know what the charity is. Sometimes, very sometimes, I will find something in there that's worth it. A lot of the time they are they're either not my genre, or they're like, why did you think anyone would want to buy this, either in terms of quality or the actual book itself? But again, those ones are only £1, and if I've got the time, I'll have a little look through, because you never know what you're going to find in that one. But in general, just point me towards any charity shop and I'll be happy. Question number 6 is hardback or paperback? Do you have a preference? And I think to get the most out of buying secondhand books, preferences need to be tap, because you don't know what you're going to get. Personally, from a reading point of view, I will always be a paperback lover, but I am learning to love hardbacks a little bit more, particularly if I'm like lying in bed or something and it's not too straining to hold the hardback. I used to really hate them when I did the bulk of my reading when I was commuting on the train, because then you'd have to have this big book in your bag and lug it around. But most of my reading's done at home now, so that's not such an issue. If I've read a book and really loved it, but I read it as like an audiobook or an ebook, or I got it out of the library, or I have it in paperback, I am now starting to look for hardback copies of the books that I've absolutely loved, because I think that's going to look really nice on my shelf. And it means that if I do, you know, lend books or whatever, I can lend my paperback copy of a book and not worry too much if it's going to get damaged or whatever. So I am starting that. I'm not sure if you can see. So I've got like this little section here. So I've got Young Mungo as a hardback, The History of Love, Swan Song, The Essex Serpent, Death of Vivek Oji, God of Small Things. So I'm starting to... I think I've made you a bit wonky. So I am starting to do that, but again, it's only if they're there. I really am wonky now, aren't I? Yeah. Yeah, it's only if they're there. If a book's only available in paperback, of course I'll buy it in paperback. Or if it's a book that I haven't read yet, but I might be interested in, and it's only available in hardback, if the price was okay, then I would just buy it in the hardback. I'm not fussed. So yeah, I don't have a preference. Number 7 is, have you ever found any real gems? And all my books are gems. Like, why would I differentiate? But there's one that I found a gem. I did not buy the gem. So I found a hardback copy of The God of Small Things, and I had the paperback and I was planning on reading it, but I hadn't read it, so I didn't know if I would like it. But I found this hardback copy and it was signed by the author. It was still quite pricey though. Like, I do think it was like a tenner, and I didn't pick it up. But then when I read it, and that's before I got this hardback copy that I've got here, then when I read it in paperback, I was like, oh my god, I love this book, and I would have loved a hardback copy signed by the author, but I didn't buy it. And I think there's been a couple of those over the years where, like, again, the price has just made me reconsider and didn't get it. But in terms of like books I've taken a punt on, maybe, that were secondhand, I hadn't heard of them, and then I absolutely love, there are so many. So I've picked a couple off my shelves. So this one I read recently. This was a £1 purchase from the co-op book table, so sometimes they do be good books. Yeah, I didn't really know anything about this. It was only £1, so I took a punt on it, read it, loved it. I reviewed it recently. One that's maybe an older read, was this maybe near the start of my booktube career. Again, this is a secondhand purchase. I think I was grabbed by the cover. I've had it for so long. It took me ages to get around to reading it. But I absolutely loved this. This is about a group of teenage girls who, I think for some reason, they're not going home for the summer from their boarding school, so they're kind of taken to a residential camp sort of thing. But it's really about that kind of coming of age thing, but also about those kind of claustrophobic, slightly toxic, weird relationships that teenage girls can have with each other. And this book is really good at portraying that. And yeah, that was just, I think, a punt that I bought in a secondhand shop because I like the cover. And so I guess there is that aspect as well of buying books that have been pre-owned, is that they might be books you've never heard of, or they might be books that came out years ago that you've forgotten about or didn't interest you at the time, or, you know, because they aren't the best sellers, they're not front and center of a bookshop, you will come across books that you might not have done otherwise and find books that you really love. And I find that quite exciting about shopping for secondhand books as well. Now, number 8 is optional, but it's to find a book from my shelves that I want to donate. And this is probably a really bad shelf to be filming this in front of, because most of the time the books that are on here are, they're all ones that I've read, but they're all ones that I really want to keep. So I don't know if there's going to be one up here that I can donate. In fact, this is a bit of a cheat, but there is. Bear with me. I've just knocked a whole load of books down doing this. Because I do have... Oh, what have I done with it? I've just got so many books down at my feet. I'm so glad you can't see the mess that's down by me, by my bum right now. So because I did buy this, I could donate the paperback, but but then I'm thinking this is actually one that I might keep for my sons, because it's about a teenage boy, and I felt it really kind of captured that. Yeah, I might keep this. Virginia Woolf, To the Lighthouse. I read a couple of Virginia Woolf. She's not gelling with me. I have been keeping hold of them in case I reread them, and, you know, maybe some books hit different at different points in your life. But I mean, you're always going to find copies of To the Lighthouse, so I could always rebuy it. But then that's a bit of a dud one to donate, because they've probably already got a copy of that on the shelves. I don't know, guys. Okay, I'll film an unhaul at some point in my life, and I will answer this question then. And number 9 is to tag people, and this is a vintage tag, so I don't know who has done this or not. But I know that Amy from Booktube with Amy loves a secondhand book haul. And I've been secondhand book shopping with Ange, from Ange with an E. So I would definitely like to hear what her thoughts are on secondhand book shopping. Sorry, I just had to stop there because they were being really loud, those builders outside. So what was I? Amy, Ange, Gemma over Gemma Books, because I really am digging your channel and I would like to know your thoughts on this. And so I think 3 is, they've been loud again. I think 3 is a good number to stop, because we're obviously just going to be interrupted by builders anytime I try and think of someone else. So that was the book tag. Those are my thoughts on buying secondhand. Yeah, if you don't buy secondhand, I would love to know why. Drop me a comment below and say, like, what it is that you don't like about buying secondhand. Maybe it's like there just isn't the sort of availability near you or whatever. Let me know your thoughts. No judgment. As much as I'm talking about buying books, I'm a huge advocate for libraries as well. And if you don't have the funds to buy books all the time and you want to read more, libraries are where it's at. But that's enough for today. I've waffled so much, this is going to take me forever to edit into something cohesive. So I better get cracking with that. And until next time, bye!